Do you know what the strike was for? If so, what?
Yeah, or for a teacher's paying condition.
And pensions that they get when they retire.
How do you feel about this?
We're alright, but didn't like the idea that we had to come to school.
I feel that they should get more pensions for their hard work and effort.
And how do you feel about the fact that there may be more strikes to come?
It's alright as long as we get what we want in the end, as long as it's not a big waste of time.
Pardon? Do you know what the strike was for? If so, what?
It was for pensions for teachers so they can retire at an early age.
How do you feel about this?
I think it's good because children are getting quite difficult now, but I don't know. No, I don't know.
How do you feel about the fact there may be more strikes to come?
I think it's stupid because it don't make a difference. Am I allowed to say?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Do you know what the strike was for? If so, what?
No, we don't really know what the strike was for.
It was for work overload and bureaucracy, performance-related pay and unfair pension changes. How do you feel about this?
Well,
I don't really know.
Well, I guess it is unfair if they're putting like money and making people work when they're older.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the fact there may be more strikes to come?
I think it's wrong because students are like losing their learning time because they're going on strike because like they're causing more trouble.
You done? Do you know what the strike was for? If so, what?
I don't know, just like a day off school.
Okay, yeah.
It was for the performance-related pay and unfair pension changes. How do you feel about this?
Well, it'll affect the teachers when they're retired after the work.
How do you feel about the fact there may be more strikes?
Pretty good because we'll get days off. Yeah, we'll get days off school.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Do you know what the strike was for? If so, what?
So more teachers can get paid.
How do you feel about this?
Pretty good because we get a day off.
How do you feel about the fact there may be more strikes? How do you feel about the strike?
Well, I agree with the principle of the strike, which is that over a number of years, teachers' pay and conditions have not been as good as they were, and teachers' pensions have also been badly affected. Teachers have to pay more money and work for longer to get less back. So you're asking people to work more years, pay more money, and then when they retire actually get less money back. So, you know, that's a problem. So I understand why teachers are angry about that, and I have a lot of sympathy with it. However, as the head teacher of the school, then I've got to sort out the after effect of a strike. Now I've got to think about how the school can continue to run even though there are only half the teachers here. And that affected me quite a lot. So whilst I agree with the strike and I understand why the teachers went on strike, and I have a lot of sympathy for their position, it caused me a lot of problems.
How do you feel about the president of the NUT stating that there may be more strikes to come?
Well, again, the president of the NUT would say that because it's her job to make sure that teachers' voices are being heard by the government. And the best way for teachers' voices to be heard is to go on strike, because when they go on strike, it's reported on the national news and it's reported in the newspapers, and people like you ask people like me questions about it on a film. How do I feel about it? Well, in truth, I think that voice would be even louder if they worked more closely with the other teaching unions. At the moment, the NUT are saying this on their own, and that means that about half the teachers in the country are going on strike. if the NUT could work more closely with the NAS, the other big union, and they could work collaboratively together, then their voice would be even louder. And so, whilst I understand what she's saying, and like I said to you in my last answer, you know, I understand why the teachers are going on strike. I think their point would be more strongly heard if it was being done alongside the NAS, and I'm sorry that the NAS and the NUT have stopped working together about it.
Do you think the strike was a good idea?
Well, I think it's a good idea. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. I'm not going to say it's good, I'm not going to say it's bad. I understand why it happened. It's the only way that teachers have of making their voice heard, but I also understand the big impact that it has on the country and on working families. So I'm not going to say whether it's good or bad, but I understand it.
That's all we've got, thank you.
Thank you.
How do you feel about the strike?
Well, I understand why people go on strike, because people are worried about their pensions, about their salaries, and about the amount of work that they've been having to do. So I understand why people are going on strike. So yeah.
How do you feel about the president of NUT stating that there may be more strikes to come?
Well, that's up for him to say. That's not my union personally, but you know, if he's saying that and that's what the members of that union are voting for, then that's fair enough. That's up to the members of that union if they feel that's the most appropriate action to take.
And did you think the strike was a good idea?
I think it can go both ways, because some people strongly agree with it, and then some people think that really by taking strike action you're going too far. But I think that because of what's happened to things like teachers' wages and teachers' pensions over the last few years, I think a lot of people feel like they've got no choice, that it's literally the last thing that they can do.
That's all we've got, thank you.
Thank you.
How do you feel about the strike?
I feel the strike went well yesterday, and we had an impact. It was on the news, which was very good. As the NUT rep in the school, it was well supported by the members. We don't like causing disruption to schools, but unfortunately with the situation that we've got with Michael Gove, then we had no choice in terms of our working hours are getting longer, and we're trying everything we can to improve the quality of education for pupils, and they deserve the best education possible.
How do you feel about the president of the NUT stating that there may be more strikes to come?
Well, this comes back down to we want to give you the best quality of education possible, and that means that we're going to go for deeper learning. Now, we are now working 20% longer under Michael Gove. When Michael Gove came into power, 20% more hours we're working now. We want to have good quality, fresh teachers in front of you every time. If we continue down the road we are, that's not going to happen, unfortunately.
And did you think the strike was a good idea?
I think in terms of striking, we always take into account pupils first, and we looked at all avenues possible in terms of negotiations, and unfortunately we felt as the NUT that the negotiations weren't going the way we would hope so, and therefore our president decided it was time for strike action.
That's all we've got, but thank you.
Right, thank you.
How do you feel about the strike?
I think people had the right to choose and to demonstrate their feelings, but I do believe in the freedom of choice.
How do you feel about the president of NUT stating that there may be more strikes to come?
I'm a little bit wary about that. I'm worried because, after all, we as teachers got our education, and I feel we are responsible for the students getting the best that they can get.
And did you think the strike was a good idea?
For some, yes. For some, no.
That's all we've got, but thank you. How do you feel about the strike?
Well, I didn't take part in it, but I support any of the NUT members who wanted to strike.
How do you feel about the president of the NUT stating there may be more strikes to come?
Well, unless the government sort it out, unfortunately, I suppose that's going to happen.
And do you think the strike was a good idea?
It's regrettable, but perhaps that's the only way that it can be resolved.
And that's all we've got, but thank you.
Thank you.